Hey, Battle Creek Church family, I want to welcome you to week one of our study on the life of Abraham. And I believe this is going to be a life-changing series for our church family. It's been over a year now that God has been stirring in the hearts of our leadership a sense that He has more for us, much more for us than we are currently seeking and trusting Him for, and that our best days are still out ahead of us. And through a season of prayer and discernment with our pastors and leadership, we came together and we set forth this vision that we believe has come directly from God. A vision that is not only a call for our church, but a call to each of us as individuals. This call is for us to be all in. That is to trust God with hearts that follow Him and trust Him and prioritize Him and are surrendered to Him and believe Him for big things. Being all in isn't just attending Sunday services in person or online. It's taking every area of our lives, lifting them up to God, and then saying, God, you gave me everything. So now I'm going all in and I'm giving it all back to you. I want you to use me and everything you have entrusted to me however you want to, God. And over the last year of preparing for this all-in challenge, Meredith and I have been asking God to show us areas in our lives that require greater sacrifice from us and how we can be all in. What does that look like for us? It was while looking at the life of Abraham that God showed me how we as individuals and as a Battle Creek family are to start taking steps and going all in with God. Now, Abraham's original name was Abram. And we're going to begin reading today in Genesis chapter 12. You can go ahead and turn there. In 12, his name is still Abram. So that you don't get confused, we're talking about the same guy here. God just changes his name later. God likes to do that. He likes to change names. And when we begin his story, Abram is already 75 years old. And he isn't just 75, he's 75 with no children, which is odd because God promises that he will be the father of many nations. And yet his wife is barren, at least by the world's standards, and his life seems like a cruel joke. He seems to have this destiny written into him, but he's nearing the end of his life and he has nothing. It's almost like his life is being mocked. I'd venture to guess that there are some within the sound of my voice today who feel that way. You know that God has a plan for you, and yet you don't see it, or you aren't feeling it, or you aren't experiencing it yet. Or maybe you feel it as a calling for you, and yet you're afraid to trust, afraid to go all in and believe that God is leading you into His very best for your life. Let's listen to the beginning of the story, Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Now, to understand fully the power of the beginning of Abram's story, it's important to notice what occurred back in chapter 11. The world was in a very dark time spiritually. Genesis 11 is about the Tower of Babel, which symbolized humanity's rejection of God, their rebellion, and their wholesale worship of idols. There was one family in the line that actually belonged to God, the descendants of Shem. But it ends in this chapter with that family living in and consumed by idolatry. And the final person in that bloodline, Terah, has one son, Abram. And Abram is childless, and his wife is barren. In fact, Terah's name can be translated moon, which is the Hebrew metaphor for the end. It could be delay also. And so Terah's name means moon. It's the Hebrew metaphor for end, as we just said. And amid this great darkness, God calls a childless man and gives him this promise, that He's going to bless him and He's going to give him a family. Furthermore, He promises that this family will become a blessing to the whole earth. So what is God asking of Abram here? Now let's look at the passage. He says, go from your country and your people and your father's household to the land that I will show you. He's asking Abram to leave everything he has ever known. He is asking him to trust him with all that he has without any type of restriction and to allow God to lead him into an all-in commitment. See, this whole all-in initiative is birthed out of this strong belief and conviction that we have as Christ followers, that God still has promises for us as his people that are yet to be fulfilled, that there is still a mission for us here on this earth as the disciples of Jesus that have not yet been fully realized. In fact, let me read you a passage from Hebrews chapter 12. And you know, Abraham is the example of justification by faith. 3 New Testament writers mention Abraham as the example of believing and being saved by faith alone. Hebrews 12 is one of those, or Hebrews 11 that mentions the Hall of Fame. In Hebrews 12, here's what it says. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer, the author, and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The steps of faith for Battle Creek Church, what we're about to do, I believe are the largest steps we have ever taken as a church. I believe it's literally going to change us as a church, and it's literally going to change us individually as followers of Christ. What if we truly viewed our trust in God as something that had no restriction? That we literally are going all in with him. Well, what would that look like to non-believers if we're so radically generous for the mission of glorifying God by helping all people of all ages, all the time, advance in their journey with Jesus Christ? That we sacrifice and we surrender everything to follow God and go all in. This is not what I'm asking you to do, church. This is what God is asking us to do. So thank you for joining us as we go all in. I pray you enjoy the community group study guides and you don't miss a single week of this series. We have some incredible stories that you're going to hear and others that are going to be formed in you along the way during this series. And I cannot wait to see what stories God writes in your hearts as we all take steps to go all in together. Let me pray for all of us as we embark upon this all-in journey together. Let's pray together. Father, today I pray for all those who are listening to my voice today, who are gathered in living rooms all over the city of Tulsa and maybe even the country or the world to discover and to study and to pray about what it means to go all in with you. I pray, Father, that you would not only reveal what that means to us individually, but as corporately, you would reveal that to us as a church, and that we would be that church that wakes up and goes all in with you. Now, we have stories each week of what God is doing in the people's lives of our church as they begin to embark on this all-in journey. Watch this story together.
I'm an only child, and I grew up to a single mom. Grew up in church. Every time the doors were open, I was there. You know, I always joke around like I was a poor kid or whatever, but I really wasn't. Like, I played club soccer. I had the things that normal kids had. I didn't really go without. But, you know, we definitely lived a little differently than people around us.
I grew up in church. We were having a campaign similar to what we're doing right now. And I remember where I was sitting. I was 18 years old. And I just remember in that moment, the Lord just speaking to me about giving and just that act of obedience. It wasn't something that I had done. My family grew up in church, but it wasn't something that my family did. And I just remember going into that and going into my marriage with Jameson and just being marked by that moment of something that I felt like, hey, I had an encounter with the Lord, and this is something that I want for our family. You know, I would say, when we talk about giving, our first is just the first of what God has given us. And so when we look at our paycheck or anything in our lives, I feel like that we know, hey, this has been a blessing from the Lord. That's our way to honor him, is to give our first in that moment, whether it be, obviously our finances, but sometimes our time and different avenues like that. Our best is honestly just the excellence we feel like God calls us to. So our best in that moment.
So a couple years ago, God was growing us and stretching us and challenging us in our giving. We had gone through financial peace a couple times. I had taught financial peace once at my last church, and we just seen lots of blessings of our finances through raises, promotions in my life, in Ashley's life, and a goal we set out. We had just moved into a house a few years before, and it was a new house that we built, and I said, hey, would it be nuts, would it be crazy if the biggest check we wrote every month was our tithe? Like, what would that look like? Could we do that? Could we get there? And after a while and working at that, it eventually got to that point, and we operated like that for a couple years. And then it was normal, and it was just like, hey, this is like breathing in and out. We didn't think anything of it. And then, last October, when Ashley's lost her job and our world kind of got shaken and turned upside down, we committed to keep tithing and tithing off what I was making, knowing full well what we wanted the goal to be. And that formed a lot of things. That formed the cars we would drive, that informed the kind of houses we would live in, it informed a lot of our decisions to make that commitment. And what was really cool is this last week, she started making regular income and a normal payroll period that I was able to go back in and change it. And I was like, here we are back to where we were and then some,
I remember in that moment just feeling so much stress and anxiety of what does this look like for our family? And a couple days went by, and I just remember telling my friend, I have this overwhelming peace.
Just because there was unknown and we didn't know what was next, we had faith in her and this new team and this new company she created. We knew, like, hey, if we were going to bet on something, we're going to bet on them being successful, and God's going to take care of us.
We'd been here in our marriage. We've seen how God provided for our family time and time and time and time again. And so it wasn't a matter of, is he going to be here? Is he going to get us through? It was hey, we know our God will, because he has. And I think that has been just what we have seen him do in our own giving journey.
When I think of God stretching me, I think about like Spider-Man, like old Peter Parker, to whom much is given, much is required. Like, when God gives you more, he will require more. And I feel like we've been given a lot, and that's scary to think he's going to ask more.
So I think obedience is hard. I think when you think about your finances, it's a tangible thing. And I think, if as you're giving, that can be very scary. And I remember just thinking so many times, how is this going to work? It doesn't work. It doesn't work in our budget. These numbers aren't, I hate math, but I can add numbers up and think this is not going to work. And so I remember how scary it was.
I mean, for me, it's hard for me not to relate it to the season I'm in. When I think of obedience, I've got a 12-year-old, and, by all intents and purposes, she looks like a young woman now. But I tell her, I was like, hey, you may look like a young woman, but you're 12. You don't have all the things figured out. And I'm going to tell you to do some things sometimes. And you're just going to have to trust me that I've walked this path before, and I'm trying to save you from mistakes. And I know you're 12, and I know you have it all figured out at this point. But I was 12 once too, and now I'm like 3 times your age. And I just don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. And so for me, obedience is trusting God that he's walked this out and he knows my path. And he's just trying to save me from the heartache that I could bring upon myself with disobedience.